What does the book of Revelation have to do with our Advent? As you'd expect, quite a bit. Welcome to this episode of Pearls of the Interior Life. Thank you for making this time for the Lord and for the opportunity to be here and be a part of that. Okay, Advent is here. We were looking at that last week, and now here we are with it right upon us, starting up this Sunday. So today we want to look at the seriousness of Advent, the gravity of Advent, especially in our current time and place in history. We're going to look at the book of Revelation as a part of that, what it has to tell us about, well, at least some of the things. There's quite a bit more than we'll look at ourselves, infinitely more, but we'll look at some things that Revelation has to tell us about our Advent. At the end of this, we'll also just have a few comments about Thanksgiving, since this is coming out on Thanksgiving Day. So let's start off with reflecting on Advent. And what do we often say with Christmas? There's that line, it can sound again like a Hallmark line, a throwaway line. We want Christ to be born anew in our hearts. And that sounds great. It sounds just that beautiful, pious sentiment. It pictures some Currier and Ives images and lovely festive music playing in the background, some harps and nice horn section. But it's meant to be, as we know, quite real, that we bring Christ into the world in new ways, that we grow in relationship with God, we grow in our own personal holiness, so that we bring something new into the world, some new goodness, some new source of grace that wouldn't have been there otherwise. We bring it to the people God puts before us. We're motivated to do something new in our life, or with the people that we're ordinarily with, we have a new way of encouraging them, of brightening their life by being receptive to the promptings of the Holy Spirit. How are we meant to best love them? How are we meant to best bring them to the highest and best things that God desires for them? That is how we bring Christ into the world anew. And most importantly, for our own salvation, for our own growth in holiness and sanctity. And that isn't easy. It is not easy at all. And that is the story of the original nativity. It was not easy for Christ to come into the world then. It wasn't easy for Christ to come into the world just in terms of the physical elements. Wintertime is cold in the Holy Land. It gets down to the 40s and can even dip down into the 30s on average at that time of the year. It wasn't easy in terms of the townspeople and just in terms of culture around them. When they had to make that trip that they made to Bethlehem as part of the census, arduous to do back then, no Hampton Inns along the roadsides. And then when they got there, there was no hospitality, no room at the inn. Come on, for a pregnant woman. They couldn't have figured this out. It was a different world, a different time, very, very harsh. It was hard with that in terms of the political system. The Roman Empire, there was a tough taskmaster that they had to live under at that point in time. It was not easy in terms of the religious elites at that time, who put great burdens on others while they simply widened their own phylacteries and enjoyed places of honor at the banquets. And then most importantly, it wasn't easy spiritually. This is where we get to the book of Revelation. It was not easy for the Christ child to come into the world. Why? Book of Revelation tells us about this. When we come into chapter 12 in Revelation, we see the Virgin Mary about to give birth. Different for a different time, but we know that this is Mary coming in from chapter 11, where we're hearing about the Ark of the Covenant. And then we follow up with this. A great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child and wailed aloud in pain as she labored to give birth. And then it continues on with the ancient enemy. Then the dragon stood before the woman about to give birth, to devour her child when she gave birth. She gave birth to a son, a male child, destined to rule all the nations with an iron rod. Her child was caught up to God and his throne. So the way tradition sees this and understands this, again, remember Revelation, we're looking at many different points in time. We're looking sometimes back primordially, back to the beginnings of creation. Sometimes we're looking at that point in time. Sometimes we're looking at the fall of Jerusalem. Sometimes we're looking at the end times when Christ comes again. All of these, for God, all of time is one. All of these are layered in there. But it's certainly looking at the birth of Christ. Remember, after the fall, when Adam and Eve are cast into the desert and Satan gets his sentencing, his chastisement, he is told that there will be enmity between the woman and her son. The son will crush Satan's head. And from then on, for millennia, Satan was watching. He was watching. He was waiting. He was training for battle. And that's the enemy. That serpent that is there just waiting as the woman gives birth to devour. And spiritually, this is what Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were up against, leading up to the nativity, leading up to his birth. So everything is going against them. Now, obviously, they have God going for them, and that makes all the difference. But that being said, as God allows things to play out in the course of things here in our fallen world, much was going against them, and we shouldn't expect it to be any different for us as we come to each Christmas, as we come to each new nativity in our spiritual soul. It will face the same sorts of challenges. It'll face the same sorts of challenges in all of those ways that it was difficult for Christ to come into this world 2,000 years ago. Even, again, just in terms of the elements, physically, it's winter, it's cold, it's dark. There are people, many people, that affects their personality, SADS. It makes it very difficult to be optimistic, to experience consolation. What of the townspeople, the villagers? Well, we have a virtual village to start with. We have the evil of Facebook and Instagram and so on, all of that pitted against God, every bit, again, for a different day. It is just hopeless on social media, and we just need to cast that aside. There's no redeeming it. There's no turning Facebook to good. It will only drag us down. And the challenge is becoming ever more prevalent, the divisions between friends and family as things become just more and more polarized, which brings us to the challenge with the government. Our government now is resembling more and more the Roman totalitarian tyranny that was experienced back then. Look, there are many things I would love to speak about plainly in these videos that can't be done. They'll be taken down. There are many things I like to write plainly in the emails I send out that can't be done. My email provider will drop me. There are many things I'd like to include plainly in the mobile app that's finally about to come out. Can't do that. It will get dropped, and many of these things are now literally investigational and looked at as hate crimes. That's the world that we live in now. All of that going against having a good and holy Christmas. But most importantly, we face that spiritual challenge. That same serpent that was waiting to devour the Christ child, that same serpent, that same ancient enemy is waiting to devour Christ now in our midst, lest he be born anew in us. And in very real ways, will the peace of Christ be devoured by the chaos of the world? Will the enduring joy of Christ at Christmas be devoured by just kind of the passing pleasures of holiday celebrations and the like? Will the forgiveness of Christ be devoured by the rancor and resentment in our hearts? Will the beauty of Christ be devoured by the sheer meanness and ugliness of the world? Be assured of this. There is a specific grace God desires for you from this Advent to be delivered as that perfect Christmas present. Very specific, and probably just one. It may be multiple. Usually it is just one. There is one specific thing God desires from you, to be born anew in you. Truly his Christmas gift to you. And the enemy desires to devour that. The last thing the enemy wants is for you to receive that grace. He will do whatever it takes to devour it, to stop it, including simply just having it drowned out by all just the noise and the cheap and tawdry pleasures of the season, even some of the seemingly good ones. Certainly celebration, gathering with family and friends, all good things, but not so if they get turned to distracting us from the one thing God desires for each of us this Advent. And that's why Advent is a time of preparation for us. Because look, Christ did not come into the world willy-nilly. He didn't just hop on the scene any old time. Everything Christ does is perfect to the finest details. He prepared the way through his prophets, through the words of his prophets, making known that beauty of revelation so important for us. That's for us. He prepared his way even in the pagan world, in overall culture. Look at Greek philosophy, where they were waiting on the unknown God. They'd advanced as far as they could with human intellect. It was time for Christ to come and break through and advance things. It could go no further just by our own means. The world was pregnant with anticipation for something to come in and break through. Especially, he prepared a spotless virgin, Mary, ever virgin, perpetual virginity, the Immaculate Mary, full of grace, protected from original sin. Christ prepared the way for his coming, for the Nativity. And so that's what Advent is for us. It's time to do our preparations with prayer, with almsgiving, with fasting. And so what we've been looking at is just reflecting, especially with our focus here on our interior life. What are the ways that we're going to prepare coming into Christmas? And so I hope you've had a chance to do it. If not, this is still just the time. Perfect. Great. Spend a little time in reflection. Lord, how can I best prepare the way for you to be born anew in me and protect against that grace being devoured by the enemy? You know, for myself, I'm very bad at journaling. I'm bad at reflection. I'll spend my time in meditation, but then often, just quickly about the rest of the day. What I'm committing to do this Advent is spend a little time in the evening reflecting back on that time of meditation. And what's my takeaway? And again, usually it's just one. God is simple, and he knows we're simple. We can only absorb just so much. Generally, from any session of prayer, there's usually that one thing that we take away. What was it? And then just jotting it down, keeping track. And the power of that is always to watch trends over time, because sometimes we can insert our own messages, hear our own voice or the voice of the enemy there especially. So it's very good to watch those patterns over time, day after day, week after week. What are the movements of our heart in that time of prayer? Where do we think God is leading us? I need to do better at that, and that is what I'm hoping to be doing this Advent, amongst other things, but that's my particular focus. Okay, so there we have it, the book of Revelation and Advent. It was not easy for Christ to come into the world 2,000 years ago. It will not be easy for Christ to come into the world through our hearts, through our spiritual soul, the way he desires to this Christmas. And that's why we will take that time to prepare ourselves. That gift of Advent will be prepared, and Christ will be born. Something new will come into the world. Briefly, Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, as always, just that reinforcement. Thanksgiving is a Christian holiday from when we were a Christian nation. Go back and look at Abraham Lincoln's proclamation, lest there be any doubt, or point people to that. But Yeah, always that important point about Thanksgiving. Anytime we give thanks, the small gift that is wrapped up in any act of thanksgiving that we give is the reminder that we need others, that we are not self sufficient. Period. You could be a billionaire. Great. What happens when your car breaks down? Or you need your appendix out, or what have you? Being extremely wealthy just gives you a greater facility in availing yourself of other people and their services. And obviously, we're now in that transactional world of things, but just one very trivial example. We are made for relationship, the first and second commandments. And that's what Thanksgiving is all about. You can't just give thanks to the universe. You can, but it's not going to have the same effect on the interior that actual Thanksgiving has of building up relationship. Because even if we're giving thanks to the universe, there's a beautiful snowfall at Christmas. Everyone wants a white Christmas. Well, thank you, universe, for the snow. No, who made the snow? God did. You're still thanking God, whether the atheist realizes it or not. But the real point of Thanksgiving is that growth in humility, that growth in recognition of the beauty of others in our life, and especially that growth in recognition of God. Because as Scripture tells us, what do we have? What do we possess that didn't come from God? And it tells us all good things come from God. And that's ultimately the heart of Thanksgiving. And so with that, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving surrounded by those that you love. And I hope you have a wonderful start to your Advent. I look forward to being with you again.